All right, so I want to talk a little bit about spiritual autolysis. It's something I've been asked about, and I thought it was good to take a look at it. When it comes to spiritual autolysis, I think it's good to first look at what is it, what could or should it do, before we go into how did it work for me. Maybe even more important, before spiritual autolysis, which is a means to an end, we should look at the end. Now, spiritual autolysis is something that is, of course, talked about by Jed McKenna in his books and is offered by him as the one surefire way to reach enlightenment. Let's just describe it like that. Maybe I'm missing some nuances, but that's pretty much how it's imprinted in my brain, right? And spiritual autolysis is writing daily for hours or as long as it takes, where the object of the writing is to write something that is true. And basically what it does is that you write and you write and you write and you find out that you cannot write something that is true. You cannot find something that will hold under scrutiny, right? Whatever you think, whatever you say, whatever you write, it's all debatable. And by writing this and trying to find this thing that is true and finding out that that is not possible, you will come to the realization that there is something in this world going on, namely, you cannot write something that is true. You cannot think something that is true. You don't know what's going on and you can't confirm anything. Which is a pretty big insight. Now, I can say it, you can hear it, and you can say, well, I agree, of course, everything is relative. We all know this. But to truly know this for yourself, even as so far to realize that you yourself are not something consistent, not something you can explain, not something you can hold in your hand and look at and say something about that is correct. It's all flimsy, smoke-like illusion. And to really realize that and come to grips with that and accept that, that's a big mind-blowing insight, right? And if you blow your mind enough, you will blow it through something and you will reach this new place where you could call it enlightenment. So first let's look at that, this place where you will end up, enlightenment, right? I think for me, I have to say that I don't believe Jed or other people when it comes to enlightenment. I don't buy into the state of enlightenment. Now, it's a very difficult subject and it should be discussed in a separate video, very, very long separate video. But just to summarize, I don't believe in states. I don't believe in being in a emotion or feeling or in a way of thinking or seeing that is constant. I don't believe it. I can't achieve it. I've had many different emotional states that lasted for days, weeks, months, but not infinitely. And I've had states of mind, temporal states of mind, where I was seeing extremely clearly. I could see with extreme relaxedness, but it was never constant. So I don't believe in enlightenment, but this of course depends on what you call enlightenment. If it's understanding that there's nothing to understand, but still seeing how things work very accurately, that's the closest thing I would look at when it comes to enlightenment. I would call it human adulthood, rather, as it's just coming into line with your being. It's mastering the human medium. Now, if that's the case, if that state is not available as a state to be achieved via some ritual or activity or trial, right? If you can't reach that state by trial, definitely, that's not to say you can't reach it temporarily. Meaning, I believe in having some peak experiences, in having some blissful experiences. I believe in having breakthroughs when it comes to clarity, when it comes to seeing and looking and understanding. I also believe that this enlightenment situation isn't about intellect. It's not about understanding, as in the way it's portrayed that you're enlightened is more of a being thing, which is both mental and physical. But the way I've experienced it always is that I always have to express it in words. I always have to talk about it. It only makes itself known to the outside world when I talk about it. I can only defend it or claim it. So enlightenment is very much an intellectual endeavor. And those that are claiming to be enlightened always use words to express that. Now, you don't know how they feel in their daily ritual. I don't know how they are. And if they are claiming the label enlightenment based on how they feel, that's fine too. And I don't care. As in, everyone should feel exactly what they feel. And if they don't like how they feel, they should try to change it and see if that's possible. And if they do like how they feel and they want to label it in a certain state, they're more than welcome. This whole story for me is basically to tell you that I don't think that state is available to achieve, basically. I don't know if you could do anything about it, and even if you could, I don't think that there's this place where you could go that you could call yourself that if you truly understand how you work. And truly understanding is a debatable term. I realize that if I say you have to truly understand, then I'm claiming I truly understand, which you could call enlightenment or whatever. And then we got this whole discussion all over again. So it's a very debatable subject. And if I would advise anything, it's to get that out of your head, right? Try to get into flow with yourself, if you want to call it anything, right? Try to get a grip on what you are so you can align with it. Try to do that. That's what I try to do when it comes to human adulthood, is achieve that. And this whole enlightenment business, I don't like it. Anyway, then it comes to spiritual autolysis. Have I done it? Yes, I've done it. Of course, I've read the books many times. And of course, I try to do the spiritual autolysis many times. And it's a brilliant thing. I've never committed to it the way Jed claims to have committed to it. I've never spent many days, hours on end, writing about that or doing that. I think I've spent hours sometimes, and then a few days not, and then a few days again. And I have to say that it has really I've really regained my enthusiasm about writing through this process, because it's so interesting to see how much better you can think when you write. So that's the best thing I can say about spiritual autolysis. It's a great tool to just start writing and try to explain to yourself what's going on. It's brilliant, and I should advise everyone to do it. Has it given me some moments of pause and insight? Yes, it has. And it's very interesting. But so have many other things. I mean, if I were to say anything about spiritual autolysis and my way of doing it, it would be making a podcast I have never published. I spent 5 years working on a podcast with a friend where we recorded every week for about 2 to 3 to 4 hours, which I edited the first couple of episodes and we published. I then stopped publishing and took it off because it got so much into personal stuff and it was just so much work to do. And I was realizing that the value in the podcast was in the recording of the podcast, because recording this podcast, knowing or thinking that it would be published and talking about ourselves in that way, it created this way of looking at yourself where you're talking about yourself, but you're not, right? You're extra aware of the fact that someone else is listening to you, which makes you extra aware of what you're saying and how you're saying it. And doing that for 5 years, it blew my mind 100 times. And if there was any spiritual autolysis in my life, that was it. I've changed myself through these podcasts, and I would advise anyone. It's the best psychology help you can get, is talk with someone who you're comfortable talking with and lay it all out there. And I had the luck that I have a friend who is very smart, very philosophical, very much into the same things I am. So we can talk and we understand each other, but we both have different perspectives on things, and we can just go at it for hours. And what comes out is always better than what we both individually bring to the table. So it was brilliant, and it helped me a great deal, I think. But then I come to the point where you don't know what's changing you. I don't know what's changing me. I don't know what did me the way it did me. Was it the writing? Was it the podcast? Was it the thoughts that went through my head when I was sitting not doing anything? Was it working? Was it dealing with my wife and kids? Right? It all changes you. It all influences you. So how would you know what flips you from one side to the other? Plus, when it comes to awareness, you can only be aware of what you're aware of. You're never aware of what you're not aware of. And you can claim to be maximum aware and there's no more awareness available to you because that's what you are aware of, but that doesn't make it true, right? If you're limited by something and you rub up to the limit and you're like, okay, there's nowhere to go from here, then that's something you decide. It doesn't make it true. So when you call yourself enlightened, you don't know if you could be more enlightened. To you, you think you couldn't, but that's just because you have limited perspective. And I recognize this, right? I ended the podcast in 2019 when I reached a conclusion that I bumped up for the next 6 months trying to break through it. And it was the first time ever I realized I'm done with this. I can't. And it changed my life. It changed me completely. I stopped doing a lot of things that I was doing. I started doing things I wasn't doing. I changed a lot of my tastes. I changed my perspective. I got a lot more relaxed. It changed me completely. It made me an adult in my eyes, which is also not a state, also something that goes up and down. And sometimes I lose myself in the kid. And that's just the way it is. And you could use your autolysis or whatever it is to kind of get back to the place where you're relaxed and more in the mastery state, so to say. But it's not easy to be a master, right? Mastery is difficult. Even when you have attained the mastery level, you're still operating at the edge of your ability. That's where it's at. It's always at. So there's no easy fix, and there's no fix to make it easy. And that's something you got to realize. So spiritual autolysis to me is life. That's what it is. And how you do it, look for whatever works for you and try to do, if you hear someone else say, this is what I did and it worked for me, try to do it. See if it works for you. But don't think that there's some sort of endpoint you'll reach. And that's the goal or something, right? You have to define your own goal, and you got to figure out the goal as you go. You will recognize things once you get there. It's like love, right? You will know when you're in love. But to label it enlightenment and try to sell it to someone else, sell it, I don't know. It doesn't feel correct to me. You got to figure yourself out in your own way. And you use everybody else for inspiration. You try to steal what you can and make it your own. And that's the best you can do. So if you feel you should do spiritual autolysis, do it. But if you feel you need to because you got to go somewhere and someone told you there's somewhere to go and someone told you how to get there, then you're just doing someone else's work. You're doing someone else's route. It's not going to work for you. You got to figure out for yourself, where do I want to go? And you got to figure out for yourself, how will I get there? And then you do the work, and you got to pay attention. You got to recognize when things come along that work. And you got to recognize when things come along that make you feel like you're somewhere else and you like that and you continue. You got to be self-reliant. That's where you have to go. And you only can recognize self-reliance when you see it or feel it or it hits you in the face. So that's what I can say shortly about about spiritual autolysis. I shouldn't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If you feel a burning desire to do something, do it. If you don't feel it, you don't have to. And if someone's telling you about some place where you can go, but you don't know how, then don't worry about it. If it really is something you worry about, right? You should tell me about spiritual autolysis because you've been doing it. Because you came across some guy who said, what about spiritual autolysis? And then you start fucking doing it. And then you figured out for yourself what it meant for you. Now, it doesn't matter what I say about it. If I say, yeah, Jed's completely right, and you should do it because it works wonders, and you're sitting there, well, I tried it for 2 years and it didn't do anything for me, then what is my claim going to do for you? Just create more stress. Maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe I should do more. Maybe I shouldn't meditate, right? Figure it out for yourself, man. Good luck with that.